Thanks for the wine.
Oh, you gotta turn this on.
Oh.
Where's yours?
Here.
Oh, okay.
Bring wine.
You got a working one? And
Hey.
Thanks for the wine.
Bye.
So
Cheers.
we've never done this before.
I know.
But we're going to try.
I know. And first of all, let's start with thank you. Tonight's an incredible night because it's the last of one administration and the launch of a new one, and I think there's a lot that we can talk about in relationship to nonlinear careers and how you do it, but to be here with you tonight feels really special, so thank you all for being here. Yeah.
So I am going to start by talking and asking you about why you're an extremist. So you guys know the book Workforce Thrive is about essentially taking the opportunity to really pause and navigate and drive your own agenda and your own career, which in a nutshell, in many respects, is what Extreme U is also about. So when we both met on the phone, I was like, oh, you are such an extremer. So I just would love to hear from my perspective, along your journey, some things kind of happened to you, and then there was moments where you took it into your own hands and really drove the bus. So tell us a little bit about how those two sides were different.
Well, let me start with, I wish that was true. The reality is, in so many ways, I felt that I had to navigate an unrelenting workforce, an unrelenting workplace environment. So my extreme was in extreme response to what was the reality for me, and what I still sadly see in my work as a consultant, in my role as the COO of the 3% conference, how it hasn't changed in 20 years, heartbreaking, frankly. So for me, it became, okay, here's the pole. How do I dance around this pole in a way that really, sorry, no pun intended. How do I do that?
Extreme pole dancing, let's go. Okay, sorry.
That's later. How do I really do this in a way that's empowered? And sometimes it was really successful, and sometimes it was an utter disaster. But I think what I love about your book and about the whole concept that, for me, why our book is, ironically, we're almost like sisters from the other side of the world, I think of, right? I mean, you're at one side of the rainbow, I'm the other, and yet we're saying the same message, which is, if you're not navigating your career and empowering your journey and being informed, you're not going to make it in the way that you want in the course of your lifetime.
Without a doubt.
Right?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is you hear the title of my book, Extreme U. It sounds like at all times you are going full bore ahead, right? That's what you would interpret. But actually, from my research and the people I interviewed for my book, what I learned was those who paused were actually the ones who took the time to regroup and really unleash a whole level of their own potential. And I'll give a quick example because we both loved the story. One of the people I interviewed was Janet Shamlian. I don't know if you guys know, but she's a national correspondent for the Today Show. And she started her career, and then she decided to have children, and being the extremist that she is, 5 children, 6 years, as you do. Anyway, she's full on, at home, throwing herself into it. And then, she described this great story about one day, there she is making the mac and cheese, watching, at that time, the Today Show, watching other correspondents, critiquing their dress choices, and going, wow, I want to be there. I want to be back. I want to be in. And it's an extraordinarily cool story about the lengths she went to break into a system that wasn't really welcoming her back. It wasn't designed to take someone, but she had such desire and courage to go. But what she would say now more than anything is that time off made her such a specially unique correspondent, particularly for a audience that is women at home with children, right? So now she sort of has this other dimension that the other correspondents didn't have.
So it's so funny, right? When Michael paired us, I thought, okay, here's a woman who's been in her career, in this linear way, and I'm kind of saying there's this whole non-linear path, and I'm seeing this happen, and we'll talk about the research in a second. And yet the book, which is awesome, please all pre-order right now, the book really speaks to, it doesn't matter whether you're in the paid or non-paid workforce, it's literally about how you are owning your life. What's your extreme you? That's how I took away. Like, how are you, and even when you're not, when you're pausing, that still is an extreme you because you're really figuring out what's true for you. What did you call it? Get out of your way? No, get close to yourself. What was it?
Check yourself
Check
out.
yourself. I love that. Check yourself out. Who are you and what do you need? So one thing I wanted to mention is, so I interviewed 186 women. That was a lot. And I surveyed 1,500 more because I really want to understand women's nonlinear career paths, like, or just women's career paths. Like, how did you do it with your kids? What are you doing? What's the message that the next generation needs to hear? And I actually was stunned that 72% of respondents had actually taken more than 6 months out of their career. Which is interesting is that many of them never called it a pause, right? They didn't say, I paused my career, but they said, well, I moved to Hawaii for a year. Well, that's a pause, right? to take time out. So it's just kind of owning of our journey that I think is something we need to do. But what I also found was those times, as you're saying, were incredibly empowering so that when they actually re-engaged with the workforce, and by the way, 89% of those who had actually completely left the workforce did re-engage. This whole myth of the opt-out mom is just malarkey. That's my kind word for it. But what they said was that moment taught them to be better employees, better engaged, more inspired, and kind of on their path. So while I would not advocate, look, I wish we didn't have a workplace that required women to pause, because it's mostly women who do this, and that's a whole nother conversation we can have for hours. But if we do, being really clear, as you talked about, makes all the difference, you know?
Intentional about it.
Intentional, exactly,
Like
right.
we had this conversation on the phone, so my career journey, which I talk about a little in my book, involved getting fired twice back to back in my 20s. Boom. Canyon of career despair is how I described it at the time. But the point is, that was a pause. It was done to me. Exactly. It wasn't exactly something I was planning for, but it happened. And I compare and contrast that to, this time almost a year ago when I made this unbelievably scary decision to what I call step into the void. And like I go from having this full-on job with 13,000 employees.
Rocking it.
Well, doing my best to rock it out, non-stop, full-on pressure that we all deal with every day. And overnight, I walk into my daughter's pink bedroom with a laptop and 80,000 words to write, and just me. And I'm like, holy shit, what have I just done? But because I was intentional about that pause, I feel like I got so much more out of the experience than when it kind of got done to me. And I think, getting fired is clearly an extreme example, but I would imagine from your research, plenty of women probably have these experiences of like suddenly being somewhere they didn't really mean to because they didn't pause.
Well, so you're absolutely right. So one of the things that was very surprising to me is although 72% had actually paused, only 11% planned to pause. So there was this complete disconnect between their expectations and their reality. And a lot of times it was done to them. In some cases, and where's my new friend who is a two-career couple, Russ's daughter, whose name I forget? Where are you? Chris's wife? What's your name again? Jessica, sorry, bad names. Jessica and I were talking about two-career couples and what's that look like, and I really want to have that conversation with you. But a lot of the women who actually downshifted their careers, either by completely leaving the paid workforce or working part-time or, in some reduced way, it was because their partner had a career that was all in. Their partner was the extreme you at that moment. And they, young kids, it was just hard to do both of those things. So how do you do that? So actually, on that note, how did you rock it, and how are you doing it now? Talk.
Yeah, so we've both talked a lot about how, one of my concepts in my book, which is something that Lisen also talks about, is the incredible importance of partnerships. So I believe from my research and having talked to a lot of incredibly accomplished people, you can't be extreme you unless you have extreme support. And I think for every incredibly successful person in the world, there's a village around them that's really helping them to be their best. And you know, my personal circumstance, I am married to this amazeballs guy, Liam, who is like, I'm good, I'm gonna be the lead parent, which in itself is extreming.
Oh my gosh, let's talk about a gender disruption,
Yeah.
right?
Like, I actually think there's so much media about what it takes to be a woman breaking into sort of the men's world of business. It's a hell of a lot harder to be a dude breaking into women'sville. Like, honestly, I mean,
That's what you said that one. It's true.
and it makes me realize the experience is that on both sides, we actually have to figure out how to make it possible for people to thrive, because I've learned a ton from watching his process of kind of being in this different world and being the only guy, you know.
Right, think about it. He's completely disrupting gender norms, right? He's fighting against the bias that we have around caregiving, which there's tons of research that documents in the workplace that we have bias against caregiving. He's disrupting our expectation of men, because men are expected to be providers, you know, even to this day. So he's totally trailblazing in an amazing way. In fact, I wrote a whole chapter on men want a place in the home for this very reason. I interviewed so many men who were the lead parents, and their deep frustration that this has to exist, even that we're here in this workplace environment. So,
but can I ask you, because I saw in some of your notes that I do want to hear your perspective on couples that both have high-powered careers and how that plays out, because I feel incredibly blessed that very early on, like, we already knew how that was going to play out.
Yeah.
What happens when both of them are like fully going for it?
So I'm telling someone else's story, but do you guys all know Anne Marie Slaughter? You know, she wrote the article "Women Can't Have It All" in the Atlantic. You can get depressed and read that. So her partner is the lead parent. Andrew is the lead parent, and she tells the story in her book Unfinished Business, highly recommend it, that she went to, I think it was the Fortune Most Powerful Women event. There are, you know, 50 women in the room that are running our world, you know, the most powerful women, right? And she asked the question, you know, how many have kids? So most of them raise their hands. Okay, how many of you have a stay-at-home spouse? All of them raise their hands. So the answer really is the workplace is the problem, right? If we actually require, you know, the person to be the ideal worker. So there's this concept of the ideal worker. Have you guys ever heard of that concept? No, shaking hands, no. So you know this person. Typically he's a man. Typically he works 24/7, and typically he actually has somebody at home caring for their needs, right? Mad Men, anyone seen that show? Right? That's the ideal worker, right? All in, all the time, totally able to commit, totally able to be engaged. Well, great, but you know, where's that partner at home? And unfortunately, while that was great in the Mad Men era, that's just not realistic today. We know that financially we have to have two people to do what one career used to be able to do. Which, when I was doing my research, what broke my heart is talking to all these millennial women. 60% of college graduates are women, right? Let's start there. Who owns student debt? Because there's 60% of college graduates, women. And I interviewed so many young women who can't work because they can't cover the cost of childcare and the cost of their student loans.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that? And so you end up having all these issues around women engaging in work, etc. Back to the one career couple thing.
Yeah.
How can you do it? I don't have an answer, but it breaks my heart because I see 64 million millennials about to become parents, and I think nothing has changed, right?
And I think one of the things you and I talked about as well is that I've certainly read a lot of research that would indicate that millennials of both genders actually kind of go like, who wants to work this crazy, insane pace and have no life? I'd actually quite like to have a life and have balance. And I think that's awesome, like, because we need to have someone directing us in that way. But one thing you and I talked about is that I think perhaps a better way to approach the whole topic is like, your career and your life is a long journey, and it doesn't all have to be all in or all out. It's like there's moments in time, and I think I'm a huge fan of Anne Marie Slaughter's work as well, because she really advocates this notion of kind of coming in and out, and as partners in and out of different parts of what is needed in your life, whether it be work or caregiving, and actually taking the experiences from both to inform who you are going forward. And I think, one of the things we talked about is that, this notion that you want to be, a CEO, one of those Fortune most powerful women, and not grind it out and work really friggin' full on at certain parts of your career is misguided. I mean, at the end of the day, to get to those levels, listen, I've been there, like, third baby came out at the same time as I was turning around Gatorade, riding, working 90-hour weeks. That happens. But that wasn't forever. And I was very, very conscious about, okay, now I've got to pull back and take me time as well.
Well, so you're a perfect example of the work pause thrive role model right here. Because look, in the middle of that moment, when you were at Gatorade and you're working those 90-hour weeks and you're preggers, right, and with baby number 3, and you're like, how am I going to do this? If you had known 10 years, 8 years later that you would actually be at a phase in your career where you could say, okay, now I'm pausing, now I'm stepping back, I'm actually going to be my extreme me in another way, it might have released the tension. So I interviewed a lot of women who are, who were asking me, well, my gosh, how do I do this right now? I'm working 90-hour weeks or whatever it is, and I've got these young babies at home, and I really want my careers at this moment where I can really drive in. And my answer is, and keep doing it, because you're you're a mother forever. You're going to have a career forever, and that's, let's be clear again, let me say it again, you're going to have a career forever. If you view your career as temporary, it's a flawed model. You are going to have a career until you retire, whatever that looks like, and for most of us, financially, that is later and later. So if you have that longitudinal view, then you say, okay, now I'm all in my career, and I'm being extreme in my career, and that's right, as you did. And then, you know what, now later on I can do it this way, or it's the vice versa. I had the other. Right? I had a lot of women who paused, and then when their kids got a little older, they were so all into their career and rocking it. So Patricia Koch is one of the 4% of venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. And she and I know because we met each other when our babies were brand new born, and we got part of this mother's group I write about in the book. She paused for 5 years and then relaunched, and now she's one of the best venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. If you had said to her while she was pausing, is that what the future is going to look like? She would have said no. But she was able to do that. She had the great support of great companies, great allies, mostly men, interestingly enough. And she's rocking it. She's actually one of their best investors at Trinity Ventures. So the point being, if you take that long view and look at it that way, any given moment might be skewed one way or the other, but not over a lifetime. It's part of extreme life, right? Getting clear.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to that point too is understanding, one of the things I definitely learned from all the research in my book was that people, you have different parts of your life that you may want to really go all in at different times. So, for example, I'm really into fitness. It's a huge part of who I am. That's a lot of, for a lot of people that's important. There may have been times when I'm like, I'm going to sign up to friggin' do a Tough Mudder. Might not be when I'm full on in my career, so you're playing with different engines that sort of fire you in different ways.
I love that. So here's what I interviewed a couple of men who wanted to run marathons, and their reason for downshifting wasn't because they had children at home. It was because they actually wanted to practice to run a marathon. So they only downshifted for a period of time, but that was what their choice was. So I wrote my book focused on parenthood because I think that's a huge issue in our country. We don't talk about it enough in a really empowered way. But look, it can be a marathon, it can be a triathlon for her, it can be a whole host of things. Okay, but here's the question. So how has your pause, if you will, do you look ahead and say, I'm going to be all in the future in a different way? Are you going to, what's that look like as a leader?
No, it's a great question. So I would say, I think the pause for me, was so much more game-changing, I guess, in my life than I ever believed it would be. At the time, it was kind of like the scary thing. And I knew, obviously I was writing a book, and that in itself is a very inspiring endeavor. But what I didn't know was the time away. I described it to a lot of people that when you are in the workplace and in a high-pressure job, no matter what level you're at, you tend to have your eyes down all the time because you have to-do lists and you're checking shit off as fast as you can.
Hopefully.
And trying to get to the next week, you know? And it's very unusual to actually pull your eyes up and look at the horizon. And when you pause, for the first time, there's just silence around you. And so you're like, okay, there's no more to-dos for a second. And you start looking up, and then you start recognizing that the path doesn't have to be the one you were on. Like, there's many different ways that actually might really inspire you. And so I found like opportunities started coming towards me because I had sort of signaled to the universe, I'm in this open place, as opposed to, I'm not taking your call because I'm so friggin' busy I can't get to anything right now, you know? And so that in itself, opportunities come along, you dabble in a few things, and then you start to get this much clearer filter on what you care about. And I think for me, that's the most important. When you say, what is the next chapter going to be, I have such a stronger focus on, I know what I want to do, I know where I like spending my time, and I'm going to be better at saying no than I otherwise would have if I had not paused.
So I just love hearing this because from the research, what I found was there's sort of three paths. There were what I call the cruisers, people who downshifted but never left the paid workforce. They typically worked part-time, sort of stayed in their industry, even stayed in their jobs in many cases. They just kind of cruised along. Then you had the boomerangs who left the paid workforce but then relaunched back into the same industry, typically, sometimes, in some cases, literally the same job. And then we had the third group, and these are what are you, the pivoters, who took that time and really got to that heart, you know, got to that place of who am I, what's my legacy in the world, how do I want to leave it, you know, what do I want to do with it? And they ended up becoming all kinds of these entrepreneurs, I mean, hugely successful companies. They ended up, one woman became a PhD in nutritional science. She went from business to nutritional science. She goes, I never would have thought I would do this. These dreams come true in a way that you don't realize. And so I think we as a culture don't give enough time to that quiet space, that moment, because we're so go, 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 go.
And I think, I would argue that there's fear associated with taking the pause. That's the issue. Like, there's fear that my career is going to, no, the phone's not going to ring anymore. I definitely had many sweaty nights of like, oh my God, my kids are going to go to community college, you know, all
Nothing wrong with that. That actually is a great thing.
Like, all of the above, you know, it's like, oh, I'm going to move back to New Zealand.
That's gross.
That's kind of okay, actually, especially if I look good at it. But I do think that, so there's fear that stops you doing it. And I think what I got out of the whole pause period, and I would say to anyone, is don't be scared. Because it's kind of funny, like, I guess for me, because I've been fired a couple of times, and by the way, the first time I was fired, like, my severance was a week's pay and a one-way ticket to New Zealand.
Oh
and I lost my green card application. It was just like, we really don't like you. Like, we want you out of the country, you know. But
thank God you didn't listen.
Exactly, right?
Forget it, universe, I'm not doing you.
Yeah, exactly. And so talk about, like, holy crap, like, how am I going to stay here? And you don't even know how much fight you have in you until you're in a situation like that. So for me, I think, like, the scary bit, I kept telling myself, I will survive.
Yeah.
I've been through this. I will survive. No matter how bad it gets, I will survive. And I think that's the thing I would say to so many people. Don't be fearful, because even if everything went really wrong and for some reason it wasn't what you expected, you'll climb out of it. You will.
Yes, and one of the questions when we were on the phone kind of talking about tonight, you had asked me about failure. And in fact, there's a great line in her book called The Wussifying of America, where all the little kids get trophies for showing up. As a mother of 3, I can relate to that. We just clear off the trophy. You know, you're alive, great, yay! Anyways, I was thinking a lot about my failure, you know, the long list. And I would say the biggest failure I made was quitting my job without a plan. So I was a vice president for Code Building Advertising Agency. I was rocking my career, but I had also spent 4 months on bed rest with my second child. It was awful. And the workplace, I wanted to work part-time, I wanted to downshift just for a short period of time, not an option in any way, shape, or form. So my, Okay, see ya, was the answer, which was in some ways empowering and in some ways really stupid. And I would argue that the smart way of handling this is if you're going to elect to pause, wherever you are in your career, really be strategic about it. Stay engaged in your career even if you're doing this. Say, I'm taking time out to really think through what I want in the next phase of my career. I'm doing this with intention. I'm not just doing it in reaction. And so for me, the failure was being reactive, not proactive. If there's anything I would change, it would be that.
Yeah, no, I think that's, I actually think the secret to both of our messages is like being intentional. I think that's for sure what I have learned more than anything in the experience of writing this book is those who go on to have extraordinary success are fully intentional about developing themselves on their own terms to get there as opposed to sort of letting things happen to them.
Yeah, so I want to ask you a question. Since you have these amazing jobs and ran these amazing companies with, I'm assuming, a number of amazing women and men working in there, we're in a moment right now, I'm sorry to bring politics in people, but we're in a moment right now where I had fantasized that we would actually get paid leave in our country, and that's clearly 4 years out. We're one of 2 countries in the world, the industrialized world, that actually does not offer paid leave. Did everyone know that? 2 countries. We and Papua New Guinea are the only countries that do not offer paid leave to women. And 13% of Americans get paid leave. So let's take a moment to think about that, right? The vast majority of women in our country do not get paid leave, which explains, well, why we have a stagnation for the last 20 years of female workforce participation. Every other industrialized country has seen an increase of female workforce participation except for the United States. Thank you, clap. So my point being, okay, so you're running these amazing companies, knowing that now, is there something the leaders in the country, the ones running these rock star companies, can and should be doing, because it's not going to happen from the government? How can we create opportunities so women and men, paternity leave, huge, can actually support their lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is incumbent upon business leaders to take it into their own hands, because honestly, at the end of the day, like, the economics would play out to say it's the right thing to do for the business, because if you've got a tenured employee with a ton of institutional knowledge, like, not allowing them to have leave is just going to burn them out, so you're probably ultimately going to lose them, as opposed to like paying for that leave, knowing that you're going to get an energized employee back. I mean, I think it makes financial sense. So I do think that it's going to be incumbent upon business leaders to really own this issue. And I think that the sad reality is, you know, with so few female CEOs so far, there's not enough people who have had the experience. I mean, I personally, having been through 3 maternity leaves, and my 3rd one was clearly,
What, 2 weeks?
yeah,
That's not
exactly. But the first 2 was interesting. Well, when I was at Nike, actually, and in both cases, I had just, I literally had gotten a promotion, so I was moving into a different job. So I literally was wrapping up one, having a baby, and then starting another job. So it legitimately was a leave. Like, I didn't feel any pressure to call into the office. And what a difference. Like, so I fully experienced the difference between coming back so energized, so ready to go, versus totally burned out and to the point of almost like, you know, unable to complete the task. So, for sure.
There's some really exciting research that's come out of Canada, Norway, and Sweden that actually pays men to take leave. And the longitudinal research shows that when men take parental leave, the women stay significantly more engaged in their careers, so they get more female workforce participation. The children themselves achieve higher educational attainment and are physically healthier. Hello, what's the recipe for success there? Right? Exactly. We're gonna change it. Damn it.
So now, are we supposed to do Q&A?
Yeah, we're ready.
I suddenly realized, like, we could just chat all night, but I don't know.
Yeah, we can go to questions. There should be a 3rd microphone there.
And there is.
Excellent.
Thanks, Carly.
Are
there any questions?
Does anyone have any
questions back there?
anyone have any questions?
Yay, thank you for being the trailblazer.
You're welcome, and that was also the clap.
Yes!
I don't think you guys are intimidating at all.
See, we're so easy!
If you're fighting, I want to fight every day. I would love to hear your guys' story about, you talked a lot about allies and how that has empowered you on your pausing and your extreme viewing and all of that. I would love to hear your story about how intentional you were about choosing an ally or choosing a partner that would support you, or if you just asked the universe to make it work for you, or just, I would love to hear your story.
I mean, I would say allies matter, you know, in your personal life as well as your professional life. Because I do think, I know for me personally, I talk a lot about, you know, this notion of bringing out the extreme in others, which is partnerships go both ways. You know, I know for me personally in my career, in case you ever notice, I'm a little bit of an extrovert. But I've done all my best work when I partnered with introverts, and it wasn't intentional. I just found myself drawn to certain people that really brought out the best in me. And I think it was a little bit the same on the personal side. Funnily enough, like, I always tell friends, like, sometimes go against what your natural intention might necessarily lead you to do. Like, all the dudes I dated before I met Liam were like total, you know, like, captain of the friggin' rugby team, all like, you know, big business executive. And I remember when I met Liam, and it was so the opposite. And I was wired to think that was not what I was going to end up with. And I remember my best friend at the time. That's why you should be with him.
Love that friend.
Love that friend. And he's an introvert too, by the way. So I think it's like, is it the universe or is it intentional? I think it's just sort of knowing where you are most vibrant. Is like the partnerships that bring out the most in you. You kind of know them, I think, once you find them.
Yeah, yes, and I'm going to break this up into life partner and work opportunities. So I want to tell you a story, two stories that kind of concern me and actually inspire me. When I sent out to the world, hey people, you famous people, I'm going to write this book, and you've got, you know, you've already written a book, or you're a big, you know, big swing, whatever. Would you endorse my book? Within 24 hours, the 5 men I had reached out to said, absolutely. Here's what I'm going to say. Is this something that feels true to you? You know, da 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 da. 4 weeks later, the awesome rock star women said, sure, we'll do it. I'll figure it out. So what was interesting to me is to see the male allies who felt deeply passionate about this issue, who wanted to elevate the conversation. And I'm not disparaging the amazing women who have also been incredibly supportive. I'm not at all trying to say that. What I'm saying is, you know, you think that men maybe don't care about this. Oh my gosh, do they deeply care about this conversation? How can we disrupt the entire career paradigm so we all can thrive? Women, men, those with caregiving responsibilities, those who want to run marathons, something's wrong. So that's one thing I'd say. The other thing that kind of broke my heart was when I did the research, 1,500 women responding to this, we asked the question, and I hired a professional market research firm because it's not my strength. They rocked it, and we asked this one question, which is, have you ever supported a woman who paused their career to re-enter? I thought we'd get really high marks on that. I was devastated to read that about 20% to 25% of women who'd never paused their career had said yes, and 20 to 25% of women who had paused their career said yes. That's not okay, ladies.
Wow, yeah.
So if there's one way we can disrupt this concept and this model is to reach out to our networks and say, how can I help you? What can I do to support you? That's one. So that's the professional. And then go to the personal. Look, my husband and I have had this kind of, what I would say spiral career, right? I mean, he married me and he thought I was going to be you. He really did. He's like, score! Like, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Because, you know, he love her. You know, he loves strong women. He's like, go make it happen. You women rock, right? He's the first in his family to graduate from college. You know, his mom is an amazing rock star who didn't get to go to college. She would have been running the show, couldn't. So he just loves great women. So the point being, when I paused my career, it was the right thing for our family. But that meant that I pulled down and he was financially the primary breadwinner. And that was like, whoa, how did that happen? You know, we were equals, right? Whoa. And then, ironically, he's now pulling back a little bit and I'm the primary breadwinner and he's looking for his next gig. He's an entrepreneur advisor. The point being that we're spiraling our careers. And I think that for us, well, it's kind of working, right? I mean, you know, we could college tuition is paid for, so buy the book.
Yeah.
But the point being that for me, having a partner that we were having the conversation, how can I help you be your extreme you? What does that look like today? Because that might change. Neither of us thought I would want to spend more time with our kids. Oh, I didn't want children. 3 later.
Yeah.
So, right?
Yeah.
So that conversation, having the conversation and being really conscious around it, I think that's to me the key. Right?
Totally.
More questions?
Oh.
Hi, I have a question about pausing. So I've paused and I have a 9-month-old baby.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I have a startup and I have lists and lists of things to do. My question is, once you've paused, how do you restart your brain and motivation? Because my brain is mush and I
Hormones,
very
baby.
rarely talk to adults. Like it's baby talk and rhymes and songs. My life is a musical. So like, how do you bring it back?
I'm a little teen pop.
Exactly. You correct me up, because that, yes, we have all been through that, as well as the total memory, like that super embarrassing moment. I can remember so many at Gatorade.
We remember them though.
Yeah, when my team would come in and like to have a meeting about something I allegedly had asked them to prepare, no idea. And I'm like, well, that's open, and then you see they go, oh, this is great work. I can't remember. So totally here. And my answer to you though would be the way you get your brain back moving again, it's all about momentum, and it's all about taking one step at a time. And I think, because I actually experienced the same thing in my recent pause moment as well. Like I've recently taken on another like big project that had me back in the machine again, and I was like, whoa! You know, even like getting up to get on the 6 a.m. train was like making me shake. But if you take those baby steps, it begins the momentum, and like, don't be fearful. It's there. Your brain is there. It is going to come back. You've just got. It's like a muscle. It's like we haven't been to the gym for a couple of months, and you just go back and it's like, oh, that hurt. But then you do it a couple times and you're like, oh wait. So just give yourself time. It's
Yes,
okay.
I want to take off. You had a great quote in there, and I'm going to misquote you. Something about drive dies. What was the quote that you had said that was so good about if you don't fuel your drive, it will die?
Yeah.
I'm misquoting you, but I thought that was so spot on, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. So I have a whole chapter called Magic Drive, like where your drive comes from. And what I learned from all the people that I interviewed is if you don't at some point kind of keep challenging yourself, your drive starts to ebb away and just your drive becomes mush, to use your term a little bit. So it's that kind of like knowing that there's something higher to go after is what seems to trigger people to go, I'm going to push myself a little further to get there, for sure.
Yes, and I actually think also it's giving yourself permission to say, I just had a baby. It's okay for me to be at this place. This is perfectly logical. This is where I am. And I know, because I'm going to be a mother for a really long time, and I'm going to have a career for a really long time, that I'll be totally re-engaged at a certain point.
That is the one thing that I wish, looking back on having kids, that I could have known differently, was just to slow down. It's okay. And I'm just going to go there for a second in terms of the physical part of it. I can remember, 2 months or 3 months in, I still haven't lost the weight, and I'm like, why am I not fitting into my pants? I'm wearing giant men's pants, and it's awful.
I know.
But it's
Don't chase your pregnant now. The maternity clothes are so
so
cool.
much better.
What the hell? You guys are so lucky.
Totally. But the point is, looking back, I'm like, what was I thinking? 3 months? Are you kidding me? Give yourself a break. And it's really hard to do when you're in it, because you feel like that, you just want to get on, and it's like, you'll look back one day and go, wow, my baby was only 9 months old and I was beginning a startup. Like, it's huge.
So one of the things I talk about is own your pause, your first pause. Maternity leave. I hear so many stories of rock star women who don't own that pause. And if you are blessed enough to be working in a company that will pay you to take that time off, hello, take the time off. You know, it's not going to kill your career. And if it does kill your career, leave the company and find another great job, which I interviewed so many young women who did that. I worked part-time for a little, or I took a 4-month maternity leave and I couldn't get back on track, and then I quit that stupid job and I found another one and was totally on it. That happened to me.
Yeah.
It's like, forget it. If you guys can't respect my journey, I'm out of here. I'll find the next best job.
Just owning your pivot.
Owning.
Someone else down back.
Hi, I've really enjoyed this talk. I've took a temporary career pause after leaving Google to go launch my own business, and one of the things thank you, that I think is important to emphasize and stress is that you guys have talked a lot about the career pause related to maternity leave. But at the age of 40, I had to kind of take that pause because I was going for so long. So I think it's important for us to support women, men, anybody at any stage of life when life circumstances happen and people need to take pauses. And if we can do more about moving beyond pauses for women just related to maternity leave, I think that would be great.
Which is what your entire.
Yeah. There you go. So look, here's the problem, right? If we keep wrapping this conversation around, and I'm guilty, sorry, let me say that. If we keep wrapping this conversation around motherhood and women, and their careers, we got a problem. We're leaving out men. And I know a lot of rock star men that want to be deeply engaged fathers. My husband is an example, your husband's an example, who really want to own that role in their life. And I'm just focusing on caregiving. It doesn't include the marathon runner or whatever it is. And if we don't actually create more opportunities for us all to own our relationships to our humanity, which is we care for people, we care for our parents, our children, our neighbors, or whatever it is, we got a problem. And I worry about that right now. If I look at the next number of years, that's fear. I have fear about that.
Totally agree.
Right?
But you're 100% on. That's what I definitely should think about it. Who's one up front here?
Oh wow, now I'm nervous.
Question.
I've been to a lot of these events, so you ladies are so inspirational, so thank you so much for all your advice. So I'm a 20-something living in New York, and I'm constantly second-guessing my career, my lifestyle choices, my relationship. So is there any advice you would give your 20-something self to because you guys have gone so far in your lives and your careers that I look up to you, ladies. So is there any advice that you would give your 20-something self now, where you are today?
I think definitely the one thing I would say to my 20-something self is don't question it, because all of it is making you you. The good, the bad.
Spot on, girl.
No, it's like, because I think at the time I so relate to what you're saying, because oh my god, I mean, getting fired, like I was in the canyon of not dating for 7 years. Let's just go there, like it's oh my god, like my mother was like, she's gonna be on the shelf forever. I mean, oh my god, so and like constantly questioning, like I remember going, is it because I'm too ambitious that I haven't been dating? All these questions, right? But in the end, all of those experiences are what help you figure out who you are and what makes you you. And the good, the bad, all of them. So that's the one thing I would look back and say, don't worry. Just don't worry. They're all going to be amazing. You'll look back on every one that you question and go, thank God that actually happened.
Look, she's amazing. I doubt myself every single day today. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm figuring it out. I think I've got a clue, but something's going to blindside me. Someone's going to say something. I'm going to screw up something. That is my humanity truth. So I wish I could tell my 20-year-old something, that I have to tell my 50-year-old something. So let me be really clear. I think your point is really well taken. Every experience you're having right now is exactly the path that you need to be on to figure your journey out. It can suck for a lot of time. It can suck. I actually also think it's really important to understand the milieu in which you're operating. I was so head down and so self-absorbed that I didn't realize that I was operating in a construct. I was operating, I'm a white woman, who had a college degree. That gave me a certain level of privilege, and I have a lot of heartbreak for people who don't have the ability to graduate from college without school debt. My parents gave that to me. My husband, he didn't have that, so we inherited debt. My point is, we bring what we know, but I didn't raise my head up to say what is going on out in the world and where am I operating within. If I could give my 20-year-old self any advice, it'd be just try and lift your head out of your wherever and figure out what's the playing field that you're operating in. Help understand why you are where you are and why either you're blessed to be where you are or why you're struggling with where you are and then navigate around that. Because there are poles. There are poles that you can't navigate, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Did that help at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great question. There's one in the middle. I don't know if we can get.
I think, do you have one over here?
No, it's just me, so you can ask.
That's not fair.
Oh, Gabby. Now you took it away.
Thanks. I'm a small business owner and also a mom of 3. And because of that, I rely very much on each of my 10 employees showing up at work when they're supposed to, and et cetera, being present. Personally, I think that I love the idea of paid leave and increased wages, but as an employer, that all gives me extreme anxiety. So my question is, do you have ideas for ways that I can support my staff and keep their momentum going and their drive going that's not going to necessarily affect me financially in the near term, but can help kind of keep morale going?
Let's start with lobbying your congressperson to try and get paid leave,
Yeah.
right? Because you wouldn't have this problem if we have paid leave in this country. So let's start there. That's not going to happen shortly. So it's so funny, this evening is my first event. This morning I was at Hatch, a really, really cool startup. Does everyone know about Hatch?
Yeah.
Yay, cool, right? I met the CEO and she asked that exact, thank you, Ariane. She asked that exact question. And we discussed it and her answer back was, I realize what I'm offering them is something that they might not get elsewhere, which is the control of their time. In other words, this was her answer, I'm not expecting them to be in every day at 9 a.m. I expect them to get their work done. And if their work is done between 11 and 2 a.m., because that works for their family, God bless them, make that happen. So the gift you're giving them is that, which sadly is not true. A lot of companies value face time over the control of time. And I think that you're empowering your employees to have that. So that's something that they need to know that you're giving. So I think part of it is we don't communicate we're giving that gift. And sadly, the more companies that allow that, the more we'll have happier employees, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Does that help at all? A little bit? Men, yes.
I kind of disagree with that there.
Yeah.
You're so Australian, aren't
Sorry,
you?
I'm not English.
Oh, English! I'm like, I was like, wait, what do we got going on? Guy and
Just from my experience in that is, for you, I think it's all about office culture. And, if you can provide something that, you're not going to get anywhere else, that's great. And that makes people want to work for you. In terms of controlling your own time, I've been in situations where I've needed people in the office because you rely on your staff.
Yeah.
Never been there, and I think that can be really disruptive. So,
It's such a conundrum, right?
yeah, it is.
Yeah, how do you run a company when you need people to be all in for a period of time for a project? and then, but they also need flexibility in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
It's a conundrum.
But I definitely think what you're saying about a culture that you can create that you're not going to experience anywhere else is really good.
Right, so I actually think Sarah's model is really awesome, right? It's the extreme U model, and right now we might have an extreme moment in time. We've got a client bid that we have to deliver on. Who can I rely on to be all in at this moment in time?
Yeah.
Because next month, you guys leave at 3 in the afternoon, right? You can't have all, and you can't have nothing. You gotta have this, right? And I think if we actually own it and acknowledge it and say, yeah, this sucks right now, people. Who can be in all right now? And yet next time it's not. Here was a piece of fascinating research. This just came out. They surveyed 10,000 economists over the arc of their lifetime. Women, men, parents, non-parents. The most productive employee, over the arc of their career were mothers. But they weren't most productive at any given moment. So it's the same with employees, right? If you look at over the course of, I'm assuming a good employee, if you're assuming over the arc of their effort, they may not be able to be in all the time at any given moment, but if you track their arc, don't you think that's great leadership? That's just great. Is that true?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I also think, it is a conundrum. There's no question about it. But one thing I've definitely learned is you as the owner, leader, you do set the tone. And I think sometimes, I've been unaware that I'm setting a tone that makes people think they had to work at whatever hour. And that's so not my intention. But because I send an email at some crazy hour of the night, because that happens to be the only time I can get to it, it sends this message, and then you suddenly have this culture of everyone feeling this pressure to be there at certain times, etc. So that's one big learning, I think, is really understanding how do you have that transparent conversation with your team of there's going to be moments where we need to be all in, and you have to acknowledge when you can't, but we've got to figure out how to break up the workload to get it done, and we've got to be honest about where we are and what our capabilities are to get it done in that period of time.
I had one senior male executive tell me that he had a similar experience. So he used Boomerang. So he would schedule his emails, even though he was answering them at 2 in the morning, because that worked for his life and his family, and that was working for him. He didn't release them. He boomeranged them so they all came out at 8 or 9 in the morning. So it didn't look like he was up at 2 in the morning, because he realized he was sending the wrong message to employees, and they were all freaking out. And he's like, I don't care when you answer it, I just need an answer.
Yeah, exactly.
So there is tone and message. Does that help a little?
Yeah, I think it's a balance.
And communication and transparency,
I
right?
think you need to be able to rely on people at the same time.
Yeah.
All right, do we have
Yes, we do.
another question? Okay, hang on.
I work here, but I still have a question. I have a millennial question.
What millennials?
Okay, great. I feel like, yeah, few. I feel like, and I don't want to speak for all millennials, but I'm going to while I have the microphone. I feel like we're completely blending career and life. So I don't want my career to be my day job. I want it to represent my life goals and my passions and everything. So that's how I feel a lot of us are acting. But ever since the election, I've been freaking out, as I feel like most white women are just experiencing this right now.
Imagine if you're a woman of color.
Oh, no, I mean, I'm freaking out because I didn't do enough, is what I mean. Not speaking for race and generations and everything. Anyway, how do you feel about side hustles? In addition to it's been really hard for me to kind of figure out how I can be involved now that I realized, I didn't do enough, and be active on the side when it feels like it's in conflict with my career that I've been building and working towards and living.
This is such a great question. And by the way, I think Gen X's deal with it too. I'm dealing with a side hustle. It's such a great question. And it goes back to actually what you said, is that I think at the end of the day, like, to be a great employee, you have to be dependable and you have to deliver what you're being paid to deliver, right? And as long as you continue to do that, then rock on. In my opinion, side hustles make you even more interesting and you're bringing more to the table. But it's up to you to know that you're delivering on the commitments to your employer. As long as you're getting it done, then you shouldn't feel bad about taking time to do whatever. But I think it's when the side hustle kind of becomes such a distraction that you're simply not delivering on what the employer needs of you. That's when people are going to go, not so much. I need, I'm paying you for a reason. So I'm all about, like, go do it. We need you to.
Well, it also depends on the side hustle, right? So I often, in fact right now I'm not, thank God, but I'm very active. I do a lot of board commitments, that's how I contribute my time. And I'm really passionate about the boards I've been on. And I was on the Planned Parenthood board for a long time, and I'm very passionate about these issues. But that is a side hustle. And for many, it can be a freaking full-time job, right? But I also had a job. I had to pay for college tuition. I had to get rent covered, a house covered. I think your point is, I'm a better person because of my volunteerism, my side hustles, which are typically volunteer work. And that makes me a better employee. Now, let me tell you right now, I actually think all careers in the future are going to be side hustles.
Yes.
It's going to be a bunch of different
side hustles.
I think that's what we're going to see. We got this gig economy thing going, and I think we're going to see people having that. So I don't think that's unique. Let me just say one thing about millennials, though. So the women I surveyed, 1,500 of them, the message came out loud and clear. And who does this sound like, by the way? They value time over money. Not to say they are not really ambitious, don't want to get well paid, but they value time over money. And they value relationships or engagement, something they're passionate about, over traditional career success. Who's that, people?
Yeah.
Millennials, right? So if we actually want to solve the workplace for moms, solve for millennials, and it's all covered.
So, yeah.
Right? We're done.
Priorities.
That's what I like. I love millennials because they're saying, I value more than just
Yeah.
this linear thing, which is, you guys are disrupting the whole thing. Go. Love you.
We love you too.
All right, I think we have time for a couple more.
Yeah, there's one down, right.
So I had another fantastic Helio conversation.
Yay.
One great question they said to always ask, what do you not do?
I can tell
I
you.
don't know. Yeah, you what? God, I don't know what the.
I don't leisure well. And it's a problem. Right now, I am so excited about the work that I'm doing. I'm just on it. To me, I've got all these different things. I've got the book that's coming out, right? I'm so excited about getting this message out there. I think hopefully this will break the doors down for so many of us. I am the COO of the 3% movement, helping women advance in advertising. I love that. I've got a consulting gig going on my side hustle, helping other companies figure out work, culture, thriving culture environments. I do a lot of writing as a journalist. That's a lot of friggin' side hustles. Guess what I'm not doing? I'm not skiing. I love to ski.
You need to be skiing.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's my point. So everything right now, right? If you look at what you don't do, something sometimes has to give, and for me, what's giving is leisure. Now, I also know that at some point in my life, I'm going to be leisuring again. So this is my moment. It's my extreme you moment. I'm totally rocking it. I'm loving every moment of it. And hopefully my husband will stay married to me. Hi, Bill.
Yeah.
Stay married to me as we go through this, because this is where we are right now.
He's probably skiing right now.
He is goddamn skiing, actually, next weekend. No, can I go with you? No, sorry. But the point is, right. So that's what I'm not doing. What about you?
I don't cook.
Oh, God, yeah.
I can't cook.
I eat.
Yeah, I eat. My mother describes me as the one who can't cook. But I do have to tell you a funny story because it is funny. So last week, half of my family, my husband and 2 other kids, were still in New Zealand, and I had the oldest one with me. So I was so proud of myself that I was going to cook for a week. I made every meal, all organized so he could come home and put, all prepared. You guys, I got home every night, and he had had so much ice cream and cereal in a bowl that he did not eat anything I had prepared. In other words, I think I'm that bad that he needs to protect himself against having to put anything I made in his mouth.
Fine, Mom.
Yeah, I suck at cooking.
Hi there. My question is a little bit different maybe. Aside from being extroverted women, you also seem very confident.
Confident, did you say? Or
Confident, no, neither.
competent or
Confident.
Oh,
We're just clarifying how many great ways you can compliment us.
Excuse me. Yeah. And I'm a father of 3 daughters, all under 4.
Nice.
And, yeah.
Dude, God bless
We
you.
were busy, yeah. Yeah. And my question to you is, I have an amazing wife who's incredible with our daughters, but I'd like to talk to women, particularly who are successful and confident. And I want to raise daughters who have that in them, who are content with their life and they're confident and happy and strong and all those great qualities. And was there a role model in your lives, or you talk a lot about maternity leave and that influence in your lives, or just someone influential in what they did to, you think, kind of like create that foundation for you?
I have to say my husband. I'm really lucky. He's nothing I ever imagined I'm a wasp. He's Italian Catholic, first in his family to go to college. His grandfather's, over on Ellis Island, the whole 9 yards. We are not the obvious pair. And, when we first started dating, I was like, you're dating him? You're dating her? But for us, it works because we he has deep reverence for people who are truly living their truth and believes in true fairness and justice. And he believes in supporting that in his deep core. And I do too. And so we have a value system that's aligned. And he has modeled for me through the years being a great man who, every company he's ever left, all of the employees under him go, don't leave, you're the only one modeling work-life integration for us. He's very out and proud about being an engaged father, etc. He's kind of one of my heroes. So for me, that's who I get my strength from, is having that partner who just is like, you go girl, I'll do what you can do, and we'll support it. Now, it's not been easy, let me be clear, 30 years later. It's not perfect, but that to me was great. The other person I just want to say is my father, who's a late-in-life feminist. It took me a long time to train him right, and he has just come on strong. And he wasn't always; he was pretty patriarchal. And he'd go to college, marry, find someone, kind of thing. Wow. But he watching my journey and watching me struggle with all of this said something's wrong. And he actually now said, I want all of the men in my book club to read your book because we're the problem. So that's kind of inspiring to see that. I know, right? How cool is that? So, there you have it. So you men rock.
Yeah.
You are the allies.
Yeah.
So.
And I would say, actually, I have so many male role models, actually. I grew up in an era where those were your role models, and I think that's awesome. I think, for your daughters, I hope they continue to have the incredible male role models, kind of like I did. But I would say, overarchingly, though, I feel amazingly lucky to have had parents that did not overparent me. And,
Wussifying?
The wussifying. I have a big section in my book, the participation trophy culture, the helicopter parenting. It just breaks my heart because it is dampening people's potential when you don't let them fall, and I feel so lucky that, I had parents who, they let me have really painful failures and they let me process it on my own, and that's where confidence does come from, I feel like. And so that would probably be the one thing I'd say is, these girls you have are going to blow you away and grow up to be such strong, amazing women, so don't get in the way and don't worry about them to the extent that you overprotect them, they'll be amazing.
Lucky them. Lucky them to have you as a dad.
Thank you very, very much.